Imagine a small glass tube, merely 25 to 30 millimeters in length, smaller than a light bulb, about the size of a finger. Yet within this tiny device lay enough power to change the fate of entire nations, to potentially end millions of lives, or perhaps to serve as a tool for peace and security. This was the Krytron, a device so crucial to nuclear weapons that those who built weapons considered it more valuable than gold. What exactly is a Krytron? It is an ultra-high-speed switch capable of activating 5,000 volts and 3,000 amperes of current in just 5 to 30 nanoseconds. A nanosecond is 1/billionth of a second. Consider it is the time it takes you to blink your eyes. A Krytron has already activated 5,000 volts of electricity. This speed is so extraordinary that ordinary human comprehension struggles to grasp it. In a nuclear weapon, the precision of detonation depends entirely on this speed. If even 1 nanosecond of difference occurs in the explosion, the entire device could destroy itself or place millions of lives in grave danger. This device was developed during the 1940s, when the world was embroiled in war and scientists were inventing new things. But even in the 1980s, it remained essential for nuclear weapons. EG&G, an American company that was a Pentagon contractor, manufactured this device. This company, which supplied sensitive electronic components to NASA, NATO, and the American military, operated in a world where everything was accounted for, where the purpose of every device was known. But somehow, devices began disappearing from this company, and no one knew where they were going, who would use them, and for what purpose. In the early 1980s, the world stood at the threshold of a new era. The Cold War was at its peak, and every superpower was busy strengthening its military power. In the nuclear arms race, some countries were ahead, some were behind, and some were trying to join this race. This was a time when a small device was worth millions of dollars, when intelligence agencies were awakened at night searching for this thing, and when a single wrong decision could change the fate of the entire world. In 1974, when India conducted its first nuclear test, a new era began for Pakistan. President Zulfikar Ali Bhutto decided that Pakistan would also become a nuclear power doctor. Abdul Qadir Ghin, known as the father of Pakistan's atomic bomb, was given this responsibility. A secret laboratory was constructed in the mountains of Kahuta Research Laboratories. This was the place where Pakistan's nuclear weapons were being developed, where scientists worked day and night, and where a great dream was being transformed into reality. But there was one major problem: Krytrons. This device was not manufactured in Pakistan. Not in 1980. Not today. This device was only made in America, and America had imposed strict restrictions on its export. Under the Atomic Energy Act and the Arms Control Act, the export of Krytrons to any non-NATO country was prohibited. This was something without which nuclear weapons could not be made, and this was something Pakistan had to obtain at any cost. Pakistan's intelligence agency, IC, was given the responsibility this thing had to be obtained at any cost, but it wasn't that easy. Export restrictions were strict, and Pakistan was already under suspicion. This was a challenge that forced intelligence agencies to adopt a new strategy, a strategy that would be written in golden letters in the pages of history. But Pakistan was not alone, thousands of miles away. At the same time, another country was also searching for this same thing. Israel, which had been running a secret nuclear program since the 1950s, also needed Krytrons. Since the 1950s, Israel had secretly started developing its nuclear weapons. By the time the world learned about it, Israel had already become a nuclear power quietly, without telling anyone. But nuclear weapons require continuous new components. Every new weapon needs new Krytrons, and so do old weapons. This was a continuous process, a race that never ended. And Israel also had to obtain this device from America, the same route that Pakistan wanted. Israel's intelligence agency adopted a unique strategy. They looked for a person who was in international business, who had companies that could export, and who was wealthy enough that no one would suspect him. This person was Arnon Milchan, an Israeli businessman who had also come into film production. Arnon Milchan's story is no less than a film. He was born in Israel, into a wealthy family. His father was in the oil business. Arnon started his own business early and achieved success, but there was a secret layer to his story. He also worked for Israel's intelligence agency. This was a world where wealthy businessmen could become spies, where film producers could be soldiers in a great war. In 1985, a famous film, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, was made starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Millions of people watched this film, fell in love with the romantic story, spent moments laughing and crying, but no one knew that the producer of this film was part of one of the world's greatest secrets, that this man was entangled in a web spun by Cold War politics. But Anon Milchin needed one thing: a person in America who could supply Krytrons. And this person was found Richard Kelly Smith. Richard Kelly Smith was a wealthy scientist. He had worked in aerospace, on the world's biggest defense projects, and had established a company, Milco International Incorporated. This company was established for a specific purpose: the sale of sensitive defense equipment. The name commanded respect worldwide, and people believed this was a trustworthy company. Milco International had contracts with the American military, NATO, and NASA. This was a trustworthy company, at least on the surface. Richard Smith was offered a large sum of money if he could supply Krytrons. This was a deal that could make him rich for the rest of his life, a deal that could make him incredibly wealthy. But there was one problem. The export of Krytrons was illegal. American law was clear: this thing could not go to any non-NATO country. So what did Richard Smith do? He deceived. He started sending Krytrons by labeling them as radio tubes or photocopier parts. False information was entered into documents. Customs was deceived. And from 1980 to 1982, approximately 1,000 Krytrons left America and reached Israel, a country that possessed nuclear weapons. But it told no one about it. Richard Smith probably didn't know where these things were going, maybe. But one thing was clear: he knowingly broke the law, and he took money for it. This was a deception that changed the course of history. A deal whose consequences would be felt around the world. In 1985, everything changed. This was a year when a big rock came to the water's surface and everything sank. American Customs and the Defense Department checked purchase records from EG&G, discovered that thousands of Krytrons were missing, so many that no one could tell where they had gone. Approximately 800 Krytrons had reached Israel, but when Americans asked, Israel only had 469. Where were the remaining 331? This was a question no one could answer. Israel said the remaining items were wasted in experiments. This was strange: 331 Krytrons wasted in experiments. Was this possible? Was this truth or a big lie? And then another thing came to light: approximately 200 Krytrons were unaccounted for. They were not in Israel, not anywhere else. They had vanished as if someone had taken them in their hands and walked away, as if they had disappeared, as if they never existed. These 200 Krytrons were the beginning of a story that continues to this day. Investigations revealed a dramatic picture. Krytrons first reached Israel, then went from there to West Germany, and then to East Germany, which at that time was an ally of the Soviet Union, completely outside American influence. From East Germany, these items went to Poland, and then Pakistan. This was a long journey from America to Israel. Israel to Europe. Europe to Asia. Stash. A new company. A new request. A new deception. This was a web that someone had carefully woven, a web in which great people got caught. Kahuta. Pakistani Dan among the mountains. He was a secret laboratory. Kahuta Research Laboratories. Kahuta, this name still echoes around the world when nuclear proliferation is mentioned. This was the place where Pakistan's nuclear weapons were being developed, where scientists dedicated their lives, where a nation's dream was becoming reality. By 1984, KRL had conducted tests of its nuclear device, Nayar Sargodha, in the mountains. These were cold tests, without actual explosion, just to check the device's performance. But for these, correct timing was necessary, and for timing, Krytrons were essential. This was something without which any nuclear tests was impossible, and this was something Pakistan did not have. Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission (PEAC) was responsible for making weapons, and ISI was responsible for obtaining components. Both together created a secret network spread across the world. This was a web in which the interests of several countries intertwined, where everyone was trying to achieve their own purpose. When news of the Krytrons arrived, Pakistani scientists learned that the thing they needed had arrived. How it came, Who brought it, they probably didn't know. But it had arrived, and that was what mattered. At this turning point in history, a small device changed the fate of a nation that had been fighting for its survival for a long time. In 1985, America was shaken by a great uproar. This was a year when several major espionage cases came to light: John Anthony Walker, Richard Kelly Smith, and several others. But the Krytron scandal was different from all of them, a case that shocked the world. Richard Kelly Smith was charged in May 1985 on 30 counts: Arms Control Act, violation, illegal export, deception. This was a case that drew the attention of all of America. But where was Smith? He had fled, leaving home behind, leaving a big question. For 16 years, Richard Smith remained a fugitive in Spain, and perhaps other countries. He changed his name, changed his face, built a new life. Perhaps he thought time would make everyone forget that after 16 years no one would hunt him. But he was wrong. After 16 years of flight, in July 2001, Smith was arrested in Malaga, Spain. He was living under his own name, perhaps so confident that he thought no one would recognize him anymore. But the American government had been hunting him, and now he was brought back to a country where he would face trial. In 2002, Smith pleaded guilty. His IDs was a grave error. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. But what changed in 3 years? Was this punishment enough for such a thing? And did the 200 Krytrons that disappeared also come with him? These questions still await answers today. But what happened to Arno Milchan? Milchan was never charged. Credible evidence was not found, the American government said. Perhaps he didn't know what Krytrons were. Perhaps he genuinely made the deals. Perhaps he himself was a victim of a great conspiracy. But one thing remained: rumors persisted for decades. People said Milchan was a spy, a man who would do anything for his country. Books were written, jokes were made, questions were raised. And then, in 2011, a book came confidential. The Life of Secret Agent Turned Hollywood Tycoon. This book was Arnon Milchan's biography, and it stated that Milchan had worked for Israel's nuclear program. This book was the truth, a truth that came after a very long time. And then, in November 2013, on an Israeli television program, Arnon Milchan himself confessed. He said whatever was written about him in the book is correct. After decades of silence, a Hollywood producer confessed I was a spy. This was a moment when the pages of history were rewritten again, when a man brought his truth before the world. But the biggest question was, where did those 200 Krytrons go? In 1985, American Customs and the Defense Department told ABC television these items reached Pakistan. This was an acknowledgement that turned all calculations upside down. The route was this: America to Israel, Israel to West Germany, West Germany to East Germany. East Germany was a Soviet ally, outside American influence. From there to Poland, and then Pakistan. This was a complicated chain, one deception after another, one theft after another. No one knew who was at the end, who was receiving these things, and who was the mastermind behind this entire web. This was a puzzle with no simple answer. The Reagan administration reacted. Pakistan's export license for flash X-ray cameras was cancelled. These were also important devices for nuclear testing, and $30 million were allocated to strengthen customs. This was a reaction that came very late, an action that had already happened. But note, this all happened in 1985. The Krytrons had already reached Pakistan. This was a story where great powers needed each other, and where laws became weak. This was a world where politics overwhelmed science, and where nuclear proliferation became difficult to stop. Today, after almost 40 years, some questions remain unanswered. Did 200 Krytrons really reach Pakistan? Was the device used in Kahuta the same? Were these the Krytrons used in Pakistan's nuclear test scene in 1998, when 6 nuclear explosions occurred? Did Richard Smith and Arnon Milchan know what the consequences of their deals would be? And was there someone behind all this? Someone who is still somewhere today, laughing as he sleeps? There is no definite answer. This entire story is secret, and perhaps we will never know what the truth is. This is a story where everyone has their own story, and where the line between truth and falsehood is very thin. But one thing is clear: the Krytron scandal taught the world a lesson. This lesson is that when great powers need each other, restrictions become weak. When Cold War politics moved, when Pakistan was America's friend and Israel was America's ally, respect for laws also decreased. This is a lesson that remains relevant today and will be remembered in the years to come. The Krytron scandal is a story of friendship, enmity, profit, and betrayal. This is a story where one man deceived his country, one man hid from his friends, and one man spent his entire life carrying a secret. This is a story that teaches us that the world is not as simple as we think. Richard Smith did this for money. He was not a spy. He was a businessman chasing profit. But the result of his actions was that a crucial device for a nuclear weapon reached a foreign country. This was a lesson that came at a very high price and will be remembered in the years to come. Anand Milchan served his country, his Israel, his people. But what was the price of his service? Did he know where some things were going? Did he knowingly close his eyes? These are questions that may never be answered, but they force us to think. Pakistan achieved its purpose. Krytrons were obtained. Nuclear weapons were made. And today, Pakistan is a nuclear power, the 6th nuclear country in the world. This is a reality that no one can change. And this is a story that will be written in golden letters in history. In today's world, Krytrons are still a controlled device. Export restrictions are still in place. International agreements, group of suppliers, and several agencies are trying to ensure these things don't go to other countries. But the question is, do these restrictions really work? History has shown that when a country wants something, it finds a way to obtain it, no matter how complicated the route, no matter how many deceptions are involved. The Krytron scandal is an example of the story of a small bulb that could affect millions of lives. This is a story that shows how the world operates with deception, profit, and silences. Today also, in many parts of the world, such webs are being formed. There are people trying to break laws. There are countries wanting nuclear weapons. And there are deals happening at nights whose existence no one knows. The Krytron scandal reminds us that we should always remain vigilant, that a new story can always surface. Should we say thank you to Richard Smith and Anand? This is a strange question, one with a different answer for everyone. On one hand, they did something illegal, deceived, broke laws, and potentially helped nuclear proliferation. On the other hand, if this hadn't happened, history might have been different. Pakistan might not have become a nuclear power. The map of the world might have changed. But perhaps the real question is, do we really want to know the truth? The Krytron scandal is a secret that is not yet fully opened. Where did 200 Krytrons go? Did they reach Pakistan? Were they used in nuclear tests? Was there someone behind all this who is still somewhere today? Perhaps we will never know. Perhaps this secret will always remain, a story that will always remain ambiguous. But one thing is certain, this story will be remembered. This is a story that shows how the world operates with deception, profit, and silences. This is a story that teaches us to always think, always ask, and always try to know the truth.